Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Woman Carrying Man. You carry me, right?
I carry you, or you're a woman carrying man.
Today, we are concluding our trilogy of Mike Flanagan shows. We talked about Midnight Mass, Bly Manor, and now we are talking finally about The Haunting of Hill House, which I think most people say is his best show, best work. So I've seen it twice. You've seen it a few times more than I have.
Seen it like 3 times.
So we're just going to go over what we like and dislike about the show. How does it hold up after multiple viewings?
Let's get started. Why don't we talk about enjoyment factor first?
Yeah. Why don't you start?
No. Please, start.
My enjoyment factor for this show was pretty high. However, not the most fun. I will say there were times when I did not want to watch an episode and Nadia forced me. I will say, however, compared to the other two Mike Flanagan shows, it has a great start. Great start, good pace from the get-go. The characters are interesting. It's a really good drama.
You know, one thing that I love about this channel that we're doing?
What?
I can literally force you to watch shows that you'd never watch otherwise. I love Hill House. I see it very differently than Jake. I actually loved it all throughout. I think the problems that you discussed when we were watching that you had was just like the overextending monologues.
That actually was not a huge problem for me in this
You did comment
show.
About it though.
The last episode, we'll get to the last episode, it gets horrendous, but for the most part...
You commented about it like 3 episodes before the last episode.
A few times, yeah. But when I watch, compared to the other Mike Flanagan shows, this seems like the most spare dialogue ever, because the other shows just go way over the top. Midnight Mass, monologue-wise, is way worse than this one.
Well, I like the monologue in this one a lot, actually. Even the parts that you complained about it, which we can get to later.
What do you like about the monologues?
Just love the philosophical...
Just feels preachy to me. It just feels so preachy.
It's not preachy. It's exploring humanness.
But it doesn't feel like the characters themselves are talking. It feels like the writer is grabbing the character like a ventriloquist and making their thoughts go through them.
Do you feel like that because you've seen so many of Mike Flanagan's work and you feel like...
No, I had an issue with that right off with this show when I first watched it. I just forgot about it.
Not this show. Well, okay, so you're saying even the first ever Mike Flanagan show that you ever watched, you had an issue with his monologues?
Yeah, because it feels like he is writing through his characters. Like, he'll write good characters that seem believable, but then I stop believing them the instant they start speaking Mike Flanagan monologues, once they start becoming philosophical. Like in the last episode, it just becomes the overly metaphoric language. Like, it's great when you're reading a book to have metaphorical language to bring you into the universe, but when characters on screen, it's trying to be like a realistic-ish experience.
See, this is why I disagree.
And it pulls you out. It feels like you're reading words.
No, I disagree because so I think you and I just have different tastes because that's what makes Mike Flanagan Flanagan-y.
I feel like
because like I like that when I watch it, it is like reading a book in a sense. I do like the extra exposition there and in the dialogues itself because I think that's his intention. He makes a show like when you're reading a novel, and I think that's the magic of his work, and that's what distinguishes his work from a lot of other directors, writers, is the way he goes about it. I think there's a little bit of something that gravitates audience to his work due to the dialoguing. I
kind of think that he's better suited for movies because given all this length, he has way too much time to just spout his views, and not even that I'm opposed to his views, but I just think that it's obnoxious when characters who I think and I'm starting to believe in as real people, they're psychologically interesting and sound until they start speaking like a writer.
They do, yes, I do. I will say his characters definitely sound like writers and not necessarily real life people.
And I'm not even saying it was that bad in this show. I feel like it was mostly good until the last episode for the most part. Compared to his other shows, mostly Midnight Mass, I feel like it's pretty good. Okay,
so would you recommend Hill House with that?
Yes, I would recommend this. I'd recommend this more
9 out of 10, or I would recommend a 9.5 out of 10. What would your scale be?
I'd give it a 3 out of 5 or
it's a 10 scale.
I'd give it like a
6 out of 10?
6 out of 10.
Oh my gosh, you are I can't.
That's good. That's better than average.
I'm insulted.
Wait, can we talk about the scare factor first before we get into spoilers? Because I do want to talk about how I feel like, and we mentioned this early on, how this felt a lot scarier than Blind Manor, felt a lot scarier than Midnight Mass, because it feels like it starts off in that vein of like, in really interesting scares, you know, like stuff appearing out of the darkness. That opening scene is fantastic with that creepy face coming in. There were way more moments in the show where you had to turn away because you remembered what was going to happen. That jump scare in the car when they're arguing, like near the last episode, that was a great scare. But there are, near the end, it starts, and in the middle, frankly, it starts to feel like just a family drama with occasional jump scares. And the jump scares don't even get good. They aren't even good anymore at a certain level. And by the last episode, the music was so bombastic. It was like, bah, 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 like trying to make it feel more intense than it actually was. Yeah. And that really gets on my nerves because it felt like the show from the start was really trying to earn the scares. And then it just starts getting weird. And also the CGI, like when the writer's wife is like in the dream world, just like starts expanding. And that was really strange. Like that, okay, we'll talk about that in spoilers. But I just want to say, in terms, for me, the scary factor, it was good in the beginning, but it just got really weak because it felt like it was sort of tacked on. Like, oh, we have to do like a little jump scare every now and then.
Okay, I have something to say to that, but I think it'll be as a little spoiler. So can we get to spoiler section now?
Yes.
Okay, the reason why I think that it got a little bit less scary as you go on is because the episodes repeat themselves with different character perspectives.
It gets more boring for me that way.
Well, I find it interesting because of that.
I feel like narratively it just stalls. It just stalls towards the end because it gets so interesting and it has this momentum. They're going to the Hill House. It's some kind of climax. And then it's just like, okay, let's stop and talk and revisit some stuff that already happened.
Well, he's just trying, it's kind of like this mystery. Hill House is a mystery that you're trying to solve. And you're looking, it's kind of like whodunit, right?
But then what gets solved? There's just a 1920s lady there. And it's just like, first off, I hated that. I hate that element of the 1920s lady. She's not scary. She's
supposed to be a little
the way she talks,
unstable.
like, it's the bee's knees. And she has, like, talks like the dialogue. It's, like, supposed to make the 1920s dialogue scary, but it's just goofy.
She becomes more of the last episode, and the second to last episode. Ending of the second to last episode, you really see that she is more of a pawn of the entity that the house is. But I think I really like actually the different perspectives because it's kind of like Knives Out, the movie.
I love Knives Out.
I know. So that's the thing that I'm like.
Knives Out has great pacing and structure, though.
But it does repeat from different perspectives.
Yes.
So what is that you like about Knives Out that you don't like about the different perspective here?
Well, the pace is good, and also like new important information gets discovered instead of just retreading the same information from different.
It does here too.
It does occasionally.
Everything. No, I would say with every character, you're closer and closer to the truth.
But what is the truth even? Like it gets revealed, and it's so boring. It's a boring truth.
No, I wouldn't say that. We're obviously having a real marital issue with this. Like
no. I like the show. I'm just saying that it has major issues that I really dislike. Okay. I mean, because I liked it. Rewatching, I was like, oh, this is a lot better than I remember. And then I got later in the show, and I was like, oh, now I remember my issues because it starts to... And here's the thing. Can I make a comparison to Stephen King here? Because I think that's appropriate because Mike Flanagan is clearly very influenced by Stephen King. But one of my issues with Stephen King and the book The Shining, while I like the book The Shining, I think the movie is... I think the movie is much better because it doesn't explain things so in depth. It weakens it. And in the book, every little thing is explained. Like images in the movie just get explained in the book. And I feel like it makes it less scary. And I think what happened in Hill House, they had so much time. They had so much time to explore all this stuff that Mike Flanagan really was trying to explain every little thing. And once you get to the end, it's just like the 1920s lady talking about, just like it gets so didactic and annoying instead of like visually scary and weird and whatever. And there are great moments in the final episode, but it gets bogged down by this heavy-handedness.
I totally disagree.
All right.
Okay, so I think every monologue in the show is important. I also think that each time you see the perspective and how it gets explained, it's done very well. I don't know why you're talking about the pacing a lot of times because I thought the pacing was really well done.
In the early episodes, yeah.
No, I think the whole throughout the show. Because the ultimate truth is that the mother tried to kill her youngest kids, the twins, and also killed housekeeper's daughter. The dad, he basically has been hiding this truth within himself, being the bad guy and protecting all his family and, you know, basically falling on his sword in order to protect everything. Whereas before we get to the ending, we think that he's a bad dad, he's abandoned everything.
No, I love all that. I'm saying it's really good. Those elements are all great.
It's not worth 6 out of 10 rating.
They get ruined by these other things. Because here's why. Because it pulls me out of the story. It makes the characters feel fake. It makes them feel just like more cut out pieces. When early on, it felt like they were real human beings and were interesting. And then it just becomes like, okay, now they're just serving the point of the author.
Okay, the only time when I thought it took me out of the story wasn't the 1920s lady. When what you were saying, like at the last episode, she was like, first there was this, then she did this, then there was this person and did this. She says a dialogue that was more poetry. But
I hated that.
But and right before, like, he sees his dead wife in the Hill House. But you know, that
last episode could have been, and it was so long. The last episode is longer than the other episodes. It could have been so much more. It could have been streamlined and so much scarier.
Okay. If you guys don't know, Man Caring Thing has a lot of short skits. So
okay, fine.
So you were kind of like a shorter, more like tighten it up type of guy.
I really love it when a movie and a storyteller respects your time. And I felt like I was just like, there were times when and I get distracted super easily. So if something isn't moving along, then I just start to drift, you know. But I also love like Tarkovsky movies. Like Stalker is super long, one of my favorite movies, but it keeps me really invested.
You're right.
So I don't know what the deal is with this. I feel like it's just the mismatched narrative elements and the styles of storytelling, where it goes from psychological realism and exploring the families, and then to this kind of preachy monologuing that's very abstract and like in a Bergman movie, just like out of place. Okay,
I don't think it's preachy. I think it's more so exploratory.
It's like, yeah, it's going on a theme, but the characters are when the characters start talking about the theme of the show, that's a red flag to me. Like I that just bugs me when characters.
When did the characters talk about the theme of the show?
All through the last episode.
Oh, like this is about love. This is about family, kind of like that. Yeah.
Gives me Interstellar vibes.
I thought it was done so beautifully, though. I would normally agree with you, but I thought it was done really beautifully.
I don't get people comparing this to Hereditary. I think they just happened to come out around the same time. You haven't seen Hereditary?
You didn't let me, because I kept like having nightmares.
You can watch it, but I just think it's way scarier.
No, you told me that you don't want me to watch it because you want to try to get some sleep that night.
You get crazy ass nightmares when you watch scary movies, and Hereditary like messed me up for a week when I watched it. To me, Hereditary is a movie like that handles its themes in a really more subtle ways and doesn't, hand feed you the information.
I am watching it. I am going to watch it.
Maybe we should watch it and talk about it on the channel.
We should, actually. Well, I do think that we need to give a little bit more context to
We're
the
like
show.
Turning into Dead Meat, the channel, the podcast, they talk about horror movies. We're just going to only do horror movies now. So let's talk a little bit about each individual character, because each episode kind of revolves around the members of Hill House, or the family. So let's talk about Victoria Pedretti plays Nellie. Now, so I really liked the way that it's explained how she is the Betneck lady. Mm-hmm. I feel like that was well done and an interesting kind of like time loop sort of situation. And it wasn't like really overly talked about or explained. It was just visually shown in a really clever way, I thought. That's why I really liked it.
So she moves in with her parents and her siblings to Hill House. The parents are trying to renovate this house, and Nellie, she is I believe she's the youngest twin, so the youngest sibling. When she moves into the Hill House, gets haunted by this woman that she refers to as a bent neck lady. It turns out that it's actually her after death. It's posed as she ends up killing herself, but we learn that she actually didn't kill herself. She more so was led to her death by this house, this entity in the house. Yeah.
So I think that it was handled really well. However, in the last episode, I thought she had one of the worst monologues when she's talking about confetti and stuff.
Yeah, she did say the rest is just confetti a lot.
I feel like it was more moving when she was just kind of like there occasionally, like helping out the family, trying to escape the house at the end. That was moving. But then she starts monologuing and, you know, all that stuff. I thought her relationship to her brother was interesting. How
Her twin brother?
Her twin brother, and how she was...
Her older brother, too.
That, too, yeah, because she kind of goes... you know, her husband dies, and she is helpless to stop it. She goes to her brother's book signing and just like sabotages it and starts yelling at him.
So
Very
hard to watch.
So it's interesting because like at certain points in the show, you're kind of favoring other characters over other ones because you're like, wow, this one definitely did the worst thing. And then you watch another episode and they're like, oh, they're definitely the worst sibling. They all are terrible.
But that's why I like going back to earlier point of different perspectives.
Well, I like that too. I like it early on especially, but I liked how we get to see each character's like big flaws and how none of them are perfect. Turns out the guy who is probably the nicest of the bunch, besides the dad, is a twin brother.
Yeah, it's Luke.
Because he has a heroin addiction, but he is like probably the most considerate of the group, even though he steals from his family and stuff.
So Luke, he really gets more of a karma because he has a friend when he's in rehab, and he's gone to rehab many times, spent his siblings' money, and then gotten back into drugs again. But then he befriends this lady who is also an addict who uses him at the end to get high, and it's almost like that's a turning point for him to like really prove that he has changed. And you know what's really sad, and what I thought would be really sad, and I'm really glad that it didn't end that way, is when in the last episode the Hill House basically drugs him and
makes him overdose.
Yeah, so he almost dies if it wasn't for his twin sister Nellie, who like taps him over in his head when he's having like quote unquote a waking dream in order for him to not die. And I just thought like, okay, I'm so glad that happened, because it would have sucked for us to see him really go through this transition, getting clean, and then just for his family to think that he died an addict. Yeah,
that would have been very sad. Yeah, it was very sad, very tragic situation, and the way he interacts with his siblings was really interesting to see just like the kind of dynamics of how he tries to use them in different ways. Nellie is way more favorable towards him. They're twins. She actually buys him drugs right before going into rehab. And then his older brother is extremely, way more tough on him and rude and all that stuff. So it's just a weird, tricky dynamic. Actually, do you want to talk about the older brother now? The oldest brother, Steven, I think. Steve is the writer, and he wrote a book and basically launched his career talking about his experiences at Hill House, although he claims to have never seen ghosts in Hill House. So he's basically just kind of going off of what his siblings say and his dad said. And
writing it as if those were his own experiences, which is why his siblings hate him for it.
Yeah, then they say it's blood money because, his mom died. Their mom died there. And he believes that it was just mental illness in the family. But he is very cynically, making a cash grab. And most of the other siblings are too proud to take the money that he's giving them from the book.
One sibling
pretty much in particular.
Yeah.
We'll get to her. But so Steve really has this issue, and he truly believes that it's all mental health, that his family's messed up. He has a really contentious relationship with his father, which is really sad to see because that the dad is really doing everything he can to protect his family. Mm-hmm. And Steve doesn't see that. So that's really tough. But he makes the personal decision to get a vasectomy after college. We learn later on, which, that's fine and everything, but he lies about that to his wife. He
lies about that,
and they're trying to have babies.
And then they even go to like fertility clinic and try to pay for IVF.
I know, and doesn't tell her.
No. So
yeah, like I'm watching the show, it's like, oh, maybe he's like the most like reasonable guy, and then I watch that, I'm like, oh, geez.
I mean, that's completely agree with the vasectomy. It's great that he doesn't want to have kids. Lying to your wife all these years,
even though she wants kids early on,
and then making her think that you're going through all this extra issue, that you're trying to like discover what the issue really is, and going to fertility treatment and even doing IVF, which costs a lot of money.
My God,
he just confesses it at the very end, and then they get separated.
Yeah, that was pretty messed up. So he has some major issues.
But he realizes realizes, not until the last episode, really, that his dad was right.
Yeah.
That it's not necessarily mental illness. It's actually haunted house and PTSD that...
Yeah, because Steve's always talking
them.
about how it's, ghosts can be anything. They can be, past trauma. They can be bad memories, something you are trying to relive or whatever. And at the end, basically, moral of the story is, no, sometimes ghosts are just ghosts.
Yeah. But, also, what I like about the whole show is the same thing I said about Bly Manor and also about, the Midnight Mass, is that Mike Flanagan, he consistently puts real ghosts, he puts fake ghosts, he puts trauma as ghosts. There's different types of ghosts in all of his stories. So, for example, going back to Luke a little bit, when he has this, what everyone thinks is an imaginary friend, Abigail, I think.
Yeah. I forgot that she was real.
Yeah, and she ends up being the helper's kid. And at the same time, he's seeing these other ghosts who are not real. So you get to Mike Flanagan really makes the audience question everything. And I think that's really what Steve is also trying to figure out at the end is, this can't be real because it's all mixed in and it's all blended together.
Well, yeah, and we also learned that the mom killed a kid, and that's the main reason why the dad refuses to be honest about what happens.
Yeah, can we talk about Dad a little bit more?
Yeah. I love Henry Thomas, who plays the dad. I love him in all the Mike Flanagan shows, not just because he was Elliot in E.T.
Right.
But I think he was really great as the dad, and
I thought the casting of the older dad and the younger dad were completely great. They were both really good, calm people with calm manners.
Also, the woman who plays the mom, she was great. I forget her name. But what do you think about the kid actors, actually? I thought it was sort of hit and miss.
I thought they were all fine.
I thought they were pretty stiff. They weren't super... Also, I don't think their dialogue was great for kid actors. It was a bit like adults speaking as kids.
No, I think that they were fine.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. But going back to the dad, he battles with a lot of ghosts. So he keeps talking to his dead wife wherever he goes. And especially when he's talking to his kids, then he's mumbling on the side. It's like, oh, I know. Yeah, I know. And then he's like, who are you talking to? You're basically, telling him that he's mentally ill, being really, really crappy. He's really crappy towards his dad. He even says the wrong parent died.
In the 6th episode, I think this is the 6th episode, the funeral episode, which is the best episode, I think, in the whole show, right?
Yeah.
The one long take.
Yeah.
It wasn't one long take, but really long take. Sorry, I just need to let it know. That's a great episode. I really love that episode.
That is a really very well made episode. But it's not until the last episode when he is in Hill House that he sees the actual ghost of his wife, and then he goes, "You've been with me this whole time." It's like, no, that wasn't me. That was you, silly dog. So I liked how the trauma that manifests itself as a ghost gets kind of figured out and separated at the end, and you kind of see that it's more of a mishmash of everything.
And it's almost like the realer version of his wife who stayed with him as a memory that was with him, just regularly every day, was more real than the person who was corrupted by Hill House and became a ghost in a way.
Well, yeah, because that's one of the things that I didn't like. Let's talk about the wife next. Okay, so I didn't like how the wife was supposed to be this loving mom, and I understand she got corrupted by the Hill House and everything else, but that's one thing that I wish that there was a more satisfying ending to, because she basically... So the dad trades his life for his kids because the mom wants to kill the kids, because the mom is so corrupted by the house that she thinks that if she doesn't kill her kids, then they're going to basically die horribly in the real world, whereas the house is going to keep them safe. And the dad says, they're not going to have a great life here with death, because everyone who dies at Hill House basically stays as a ghost. So basically the dad is like, that's no way to live. They need to be out in the world. Our job as parents, you always told me this, that our job as parents was to prepare them for the world. And the mom is like, yeah, I used to think that because I was naive, but now I know I need to basically kill them and leave them in this house. I just kind of wish that the dad was able to somehow talk sense into the mom and kind of like their love for each other, which is so strong, would like overcome, you know, and the mom would spare all of them in a sense, instead of like saying, okay, fine, I don't want to be alone. So if you don't want me to kill our kids, you kill yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I just kind of felt like, and he does it. So I felt like it kind of took away from that love story. He clearly had a little bit more love for her.
But it's good because it like redeems the father character in the eyes of the siblings.
Yeah, but also like I know why she was so vulnerable to the house, because they describe in the show that her and the woman in her family line are sensitive, quote unquote, meaning that they're more spiritually sensitive to sense ghosts,
which
to
Theo
sense trauma,
has,
and which Theo has.
Do you want to talk about Shirley and Theo?
Let's talk about Theo. So Theo, it's most evident that she has the gift.
Yeah, she has like psychic abilities. She can touch people and things and experience like the past and the history, or sometimes the future, I think.
And she's so afraid of that ability that she puts gloves on. Her mom gave to her as a way to shield her, but she shields herself way too much
from everyone else. And she has this relationship off and on with this woman who she meets at a club who keeps trying to like pull back her layers and get under her skin.
She even crashes the funeral.
Yeah, to kind of comedic effect. And it's like supposed to be this sweet thing, like, hey, I saw your sister's obituary and I wanted to show up, and she's like, I didn't tell you about that my sister died.
And I agree about
I'm
that.
on Theo's side there. That's
kind of weird that you're like, and they only saw each other twice.
I know, and she's like, I saw your sister die.
And it's like, oh, I saw on the internet that your sister died, so I'm here. It's kind of like, that's really weird.
No, it's like,
but you know, it's supposed to be romantic. Sure, sure. I'll take it as that. But she's very, very closed off, and you know, she believes in ghosts, but she also battles her logical side that doesn't want to believe the ghost, because she's, like I said, very withholding with her feelings, and she doesn't want to let the vulnerability come out. So it's much easier for her to believe in the more logical side of the world, saying, you know, you die and you're gone, versus you die and you may stay.
And she has a really tough job too, being a child psychologist, uncovering you know, family abuse, and she
does uncover a family abuse that we see. And
she's very guarded, she's very closed off, and that's part of her arc as a character, is just to open up, and like metaphorically at the end we see that when she takes off her gloves and throws them away. They all heal in some way as characters. Well,
yeah, I think at the end she throws off her gloves. So she experiences ghosts. She sees her dead sister, Nellie, because they all get trapped. All the siblings get trapped in the house, and the house is basically, the way the dad describes it is that their meal that is not digested. So the house really wants to kill them. So I think she throws away the gloves because she finally faces the reality and takes a leap of faith that her abilities are there for a reason, I think, you know?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so the last sibling
is Shirley.
Cheryl.
Well, they say Cheryl.
So she bothers me a lot. She is so controlling, such a hypocrite. She cheats on her husband.
Yeah.
And when she takes the high road about Steve's money, she's just very self-righteous person.
Yeah, her arc is to be less self-righteous and get off her high horse, because she blames everyone else for everything and is very critical, you know, of her.
Since she's very super highly critical of her siblings, yet she never, she always makes excuse for herself. And one thing that gets on my nerve when she's like, I'm a good person, I don't deserve this. I feel like every single person, whether you're right or wrong, says that I'm a good person. And it's like as if that's supposed to mean something. I don't know. I just get, maybe that's my personal thing with people and characters, but it's like, I'm a good person. Okay.
All right.
This action is still not
did a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You may be a good person. You did a bad thing. Yeah. And so her main issues that she has is with taking money from Steve, who wrote the book. She's totally against it and kind of campaigns against him and holds this major grudge on him for writing the book. Okay, maybe not a great thing he wrote the book, but struggling artist, it sparked his career. and he offers he offers money to the rest of the family, but she makes sure no one else takes it. Turns out
her husband even takes
the money because they need it for their business.
And her sister takes it, too.
And I thought it was a great metaphor, the way that she, as a mortician, was shown as how cold she is, because she's able to literally cut open her own sister and perform that process on her sister.
Oh yeah,
it shows how emotionally removed she is.
Yeah, she prepares her dead sister Nellie's body and cuts her brain open and everything else, and cleans her up.
And everyone's like, you shouldn't be doing this. This can't be good for you.
And she does it, and she's like, I want to prepare her. But it wasn't something that... It's just it's almost like she doesn't know how to show love because she's so closed off.
Yeah.
That it's that's her way of showing love, is taking care of her. And I think Nellie especially was the closest one to Shirley, because I think Nellie was the one who pushed back the least. She was a little bit of people walked over her a little bit.
She was a little more passive and stuff.
She was a lot more passive, and Shirley has a really hard time with people who are as aggressive as she is. So I think she loved Nellie the most because she was the most...
she acts as she's the oldest, so she kind of acts as the mom of everyone in a way, and really wants them to kind of go with what she does.
She's more do as I tell you, not as I do.
Yeah, especially with the situation with her husband, and during the funeral episode, she catches her husband and her sister Theo appearing like they were kissing.
But we learn later that they weren't.
They weren't. Theo just kind of started was trying to kiss him or something like that.
And then her husband stopped it.
And she catches them just this distance, Well,
and then he's pushing back, but yeah, I could see how it appears something wrong. But
yeah, so that's definitely not good, and I totally understand her outrage with that. However, when you learn that she fully cheated on her husband, that becomes her, that's kind of her ghost that's haunting her, and she has to. And she doesn't admit it. No, she has to admit it with her husband.
But not even with her husband. She doesn't admit it to herself, because when she's in the haunted house, that's one of her waking dreams, quote unquote.
Yeah, she pretends like it didn't happen.
And she pretends oh yeah, well, I'm married, so I can't flirt with you, and I can't come over to your hotel.
And that's
then the ghost in the house basically is that's not what happened, though, did it? And she ends up sleeping with him.
And a lot of times people who say that they're good people, usually they
are not the greatest people.
They're able to turn it off and say, oh, well, pretend like that thing I didn't
That's
exist.
why I have such a problem with people saying, well, I'm a good person, because it literally can be used anyway.
Yeah.
That it doesn't really it doesn't hold any weight, It's more so self-validation rather than any evidence to the truth. Yeah, I thought she was hypocritical. It does seem like she came around at the very end. However, of course, because the show is done after episode 10, we don't see if she changed or not. But, that is her arc, is to kind of get over her cynicism and to be more vulnerable and to be okay being wrong and to admit her mistakes. And she does confess to her husband at the end. How does it compare to the other two Flanagan shows?
Right. Well, I think that it's probably... I feel like it's the most consistent in quality. I feel like if you're going to watch one Mike Flanagan show, this is probably the one to watch. I feel like Bly Manor has the best final episode, has the best ending.
So sad.
I personally, I feel like I like Bly Manor a little better. However, to me, I feel like the show that is the most inconsistent but has the greatest moments is Midnight Mass. So while I can't recommend Midnight Mass as a whole, it does have the best moments, I think, in a Mike Flanagan show. But still, that doesn't mean I think it's the best. I still think it's either Bly Manor or Hill House.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think that Hill House is probably my top favorite.
Okay.
Because and of course I know this does the opposite for you, but it does keep me present throughout the whole episodes. Bly Manor, I really hated how it just felt like it was slow at times, and it wasn't as well done as the Hill House, I guess. And Midnight Mass is probably my third favorite now, when comparing to those three shows, because the same problem as Bly Manor. Although less than is that I did get pulled out at times from because of the monologuing. But I don't feel like I did that. I felt like that at all for Hill House. I felt like I was completely present for most of the episodes.
Well, then again, also, that was the first one you watched. I first watched
but I
Bly Manor.
rewatched it.
You rewatched it, yeah, but I mean, maybe that's just the first time we watch one of the shows. That's kind of like our first impression of a Mike Flanagan thing. You know, maybe it just over time we start to notice more of the features of Mike Flanagan or the quirks that we just dislike. So that could be part of it. But I'd understand why you think Hill House is the best.
Is Hill House the first one?
That was the first one he made. The first
that also
series.
kind of makes sense. It's kind of funny because it seems like his monologues get more extensive, huh? By the time
it feels like the more, because that's another thing. It feels like the more he establishes himself as this like horror storyteller that's like really highly acclaimed. I think he gives himself a little bit too much excess. There becomes too much excess.
Like Ouija board.
Oh yeah, I love Mike Flanagan's early movies that he did where he wasn't like a household name yet. Like the sequel to Ouija, that would be super interesting to talk about those movies. We should do a review about that. Because we watched those two movies. I can't believe you convinced me to watch the first one because the first one was so bad. But the second one...
Wait, we should wait to do a review on that.
We'll talk about that.
Because I'm really interested to see like
that is a really interesting case study in like quality filmmaking and how a quality filmmaker can come in and like do something interesting. Even with a sequel, even with a movie as bad as Ouija.
Yeah, the first one.
Yeah. And I also like the other Flanagan movies, the one with Kate Siegel that he did early on about the home intruder.
Yeah.
So that's why...
Right?
I forget, but we'll figure it out. But we'll have to watch everything else and talk about those too. But that's why I personally think he's better as... doing like a feature length because all of his excesses that to me are really obnoxious get contained. You can't have this long talking dialogue. You just got to get more to the point, which I like.
But like I think that you're saying something though in that sense that as the more he develops, the more he's able to insert more monologue for his characters,
more of himself. But
I think that's because the more he develops, the more he makes a name for himself, the more he's able to kind of make the types of shows and things that he really wants to do.
Yeah.
And he obviously likes the extra monologues and, you know.
Clearly some people love them, so.
I like a lot of them. I don't hate it like you do. I can definitely overlook them easily. The only time, honestly, truthfully, that the over monologue it felt like an over monologue was Midnight Mass, the last episode where,
when she's
repeating herself on death, which you can find that review in our channel.
Yeah, check out our other two reviews of the shows.
The Bly Manor and Midnight Mass. But
also recommend us and something else to watch if you want us to cover a certain series or movies or books. You know, just let us know in the comments because we're always open to that. Yeah. Well, I got to go to school
and I got to go to work. So I guess we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.